Hey, what's up guys? Gemini, and oh man, are we gonna have some fun today? We're gonna have a good time on this video. Okay, today I'm gonna bring to you the history of pro wrestling footage collecting. Basically, what I'm gonna do is, okay, so imagine yourself in a world where there was no Walmart to get this footage. Imagine yourself in a world where there was no internet yet, but you really wanted to see that one match that you had been hearing about. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take you through some ways, the history of how you could get that one match, see that one show in a world with no Walmart yet, in a world where there was no Amazon, no eBay, and a world where there was no internet, there was no Walmart, there was none of it. For instance, the Survivor Series 1988, guess what? You couldn't go in the store and buy this. You couldn't go on Amazon, eBay. There was no internet. So today, I'm going to give you a little history on how we used to be able to collect this tape and get this tape in our possession. It's going to be pretty interesting, so stay tuned and grab something cold to drink, grab some food, and let's have a good time. This is going to be a good one. Okay, right here, the Betamax. Now this is the origins of professional wrestling tape collecting. This is where it started right here. In 1975, this was released. This is the Betamax. This is the predecessor to the VCR. This is what the tapes came out on in the early 80s and late 70s before the VHS tape came out. The Betamax. This thing's no longer in existence. You can buy a Betamax on eBay, but there's no beta tapes anymore. This is the first version of a VCR, the Betamax, and this is where it started right here. And if you're curious what wrestling tapes were available back then on Betamax, let me show you. First off, this is what you had to play your Betamax tapes on right here, the Betamax player. I mean, this shit's crazy where we've come in the annals of being able to watch wrestling. Okay, this tape right here, Wrestling Sergeant Slaughter and Company. This was an AWA Betamax tape. AWA was smart. They were the first company to sell t-shirts and videotapes. But this is how you had to watch wrestling at your house in the 70s, early 80s. The technology really wasn't there yet. I mean, the Betamax technology wasn't there, but this was one of the first tapes. I actually had a chance to own this beta tape in 1999, and I passed it up. But I could have actually owned this tape to this day. Now, the next invention was going to be the invention that revolutionized it all in the early 80s, late 80s. The VCR took over it all. Let's take a look. Okay, so here we sit. I don't know. For me, I was a kid in the 80s, so grew up in the 80s, and the VCR was everything for a wrestling collector in the 1980s. It was everything, because you have to remember now, there was no DVD player yet. There was no Blu-ray player yet. This was the only way that you could access your wrestling. Now, let me explain to you the Wwf schedule in, say, 1988. Okay, first off, pay-per-view accessibility not there. So it wasn't even introduced to my state until 1992. So between the 80s and 1992, between like 86, 87, and 92, everything had to be recorded from TV to VHS tape. And the VHS tape is the invention that revolutionized it all. Now, it's a funny thing, and this is for wrestling collectors to kind of tell you where we came from, because we couldn't just go online and get that favorite DVD of ours. You had to work for it, and so the way you would work for it was you had to record your favorite shows on TV and keep a collection. Now, people oftentimes they ask me about the tape. Okay, now the tape. This one's from 4/1/96. Okay, now the tape is your way of labeling that wrestling event, because if you take the tape off and you have just a collection of these tapes, you'll never know where that favorite match of yours is. So the way we did it, 80s, early 90s, you had Superstars on Saturday, an hour, Wrestling Challenge on Sunday, an hour, and Primetime Wrestling on Mondays, a 2-hour tape show with matches. Now, if you knew someone who recorded Primetime Wrestling, try to borrow their collection. And that's how you got your hands on Primetime Wrestling, because it was on late. Okay, so the way you did this in the 80s and early 90s, if you heard that SummerSlam 89 was coming out on videotape, because you didn't order the pay-per-view, you didn't have pay-per-view back then. Pay-per-view was very, very limited back in the late 80s. It was very, very hard to get. A lot of times in the mid-80s and early 90s, you had to go to a theater to watch the pay-per-view. You had to go to a theater, but you had no way to record it. So you would rely on the VHS tape to do this. But see, I didn't get a VCR until later. Pay-per-view wasn't around until 92. I hear on the West Coast, Cali. So anyways, I'm losing my train of thought, but it's so hard to explain. But you got I told you about the limited 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week of wrestling. There was no 20 hours a week or anything like that, and you couldn't just find out the matches. You had to rely on magazines. You had to rely on videotape stores, Video Maniacs, Video Madness, M&M Video. You had to rely on the videotape stores, going inside the videotape stores, asking a clerk, do you have any WWF wrestling? And most of the times the clerks would come back and say, what's a WWF wrestling? Is that arm wrestling? And that was generally their response. But you would rent their tape, you would take it home, if you were lucky enough to have a VCR, which I got a VCR in the late 80s. So you would pop in, let's see, for instance, let me find one that I rented as a kid that I own today. Is the Ultimate Warrior tape. You would go down and you would rent the Ultimate Warrior tape, and you would have 3 days at $3 or $4 to just watch this over and over and over again until you couldn't watch it anymore. I rented this tape in the late 80s, early 90s. And I must have watched it, when I would rent it in my 3 days, I must have watched it 10, 15 times because I wanted to get my money's worth. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick, what a lot of people did to not just have it for 3 or 4 days. They had it permanently, and there was a little shortcut. I'll show you that shortcut here in just a second. Okay. Now, people were desperate to get their hands on wrestling footage because it was so hard to obtain. Yeah, you could send in $59 to the WWF through their magazine. You could send in $59.95 if you had it to own this tape in 1987. I didn't have $59.95 to own that tape, Wrestlemania 4. So I had to be creative about how I owned Wrestlemania 4. Let's take a look. First, let me show you a little shortcut about what some people did at the Video Maniacs in the video stores. You're going to like this. Okay, so picture the year. It's 1988, and you're 8 years old. And your parents just took you to the video store. You rented the Ultimate Warrior tape. Okay. And you think that this is the only way that you can access wrestling. And a lot of times it was. But what a lot of people did duct tape, and they would take it and you would cover the hole right here with the duct tape. You'd cover it up with a little piece of tape, cover it up just like that. And if you had 2 VCRs, if you're lucky enough to have 2 VCRs, because this piece of duct tape right here, you'd insert the tape, you'd play this tape, play a blank tape in the other VCR, and everything on here would record to the other blank tape. So that's how people cheated the system, and they would keep that footage. They would do the old duct tape trip, and I was guilty of this later on. But back in that day, you had to be careful. I'm talking about having to rewind the tape 100% or getting a $2 fine. I'm talking about having to be very careful about this, because if you trashed their tape and they found out that you were recording their tape, they would slap you with a $30 fine. So it was very serious back in the day, but this is how a lot of people did it. And now if you watch some of your old VHS tapes back and you see the footage is just trashed, that's why, because everybody in America was doing this right here. Because a lot of people weren't able to find the stuff on TV. The only way they were going to get that movie, because it wasn't released yet, the only way they were going to get that movie was to record it on their own blank tape with the old duct tape trick right there. And this works like a charm. If you were to put this in the VCR right now, and you had another VCR hooked up to it, you could just record right over it. Okay, so here we go. Oh yeah, you had WCW Saturday night on at 3 o'clock, which you could record that, and some people did, but that was it, man. And WCW had a little show on Sunday, Power Wrestling or something like that. But not that many people were watching WCW back then. Most people were watching WWF. Now, the early 90s, finally we got pay-per-view on the West Coast. In 1992, we rented, my first pay-per-view was Wrestlemania 8. Okay? And in order to get Wrestlemania 8, this are the steps you had to take to get pay-per-view in 92. You had to, and it was expensive. It was about $60. You had to go down to the cable company. They were Quadrivision at the time. You had to go down to the cable company. You had to get 2 boxes. They would send you 2 boxes. You'd have to come home, figure out all the wires, attach it to your VCR, call the cable company almost a month in advance and reserve this pay-per-view. And then you have all these wires. You'd have 2 boxes connected after you made your call a month in advance. And they had to approve you or not approve you at the time. Okay? So you go through all this. But finally you get to see WrestleMania 8 on pay-per-view. Let me show you my first pay-per-view recorded in 1992, WrestleMania 8, the live pay-per-view edition. It doesn't just come on the WrestleMania anthology. It doesn't just come. It wasn't around yet. I mean, you had to be creative as hell if you wanted to see WrestleMania 8. Let's take a look at WrestleMania 8 over here. That's it, right there. WrestleMania 8. This is the tape. This tape right here I have had since 1992. That particular tape right there. I mean, that tape was my first pay-per-view, and it was tough. Like I said, you rented 2 boxes. You had to come home and do the wires. You had to convince your parents to come up with $60 to order the pay-per-view. You had to come up with a lot to get it. It was damn tough. I mean, you had to work to own WrestleMania 8. It didn't just come. I mean, all you had was a couple tape shows a week. I mean, it was difficult to access the footage. But, oh, man. This all changed, though. I mean, we'll get to the pay-per-view part of it here in just a minute. And we'll get to the access. And everything became easier over time to obtain. So we'll get to that here in just a second. Okay, so back then, I just showed you guys WrestleMania 8. That was my first pay-per-view because access was really limited. So, being a tape collector back then was damn tough because if you didn't have the money to buy the stuff, if you didn't have money to clip the magazine ad, WWF magazine ad out and send $60 to WWE, you didn't have that tape. And you didn't have pay-per-view, you didn't have any of it. The only way you had access to Wrestlemania 6, the only way you had access to this was to go down to the video store. And we're talking about 6, it would take about 6 months for this to come out after the event. So you figure, this came out in April 1990. It wasn't in the video store until about November. So you waited about 6 months. You had to fight the whole town to rent it too, because everybody in town would rent it, because nobody had it on VHS tape. Nobody. So you wait 6 months. You'd call the video store up, and you would have to have them reserve it for you because it was such a hot seller. So you'd go and you'd spend your $4 on it, and you would wait, and you would camp out in front of the video store, and you would call them 4 or 5 times a day just to see, hey, did so-and-so return it? You'd wait your 3 days. Hey, did so-and-so return Wrestlemania yet? They still have another day. So you call the next day, and then you would say, hey, somebody returned it, but somebody else rented it. And so you would play this constant chess game waiting for WrestleMania 6 just so you could rent it, just so you could see the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. Then finally you'd get a breakthrough, and finally you would get WrestleMania 6 on a weekend for 3 or 4 days. And after a while, after doing this, you're like, okay, there's got to be a better way. So finally, I call the video store up in 91, 92. I call them up. I find out they're closing out. And I say, look, you guys are closing. I'm going to come down there and I'm going to buy every wrestling video you own. Okay, come down. Went down to the video store, Telegraph Video, buy this, WrestleMania 7, Royal Rumble 90, Royal Rumble 91, all buy their entire store out. And then the light starts clicking on in my head. I said, look, excuse me. Excuse me. I'm going to call every video store in this town, and I'm going to buy every single VHS tape of wrestling in this town, every single video store. And I did. And I bought them all up. And I bought my entire hometown out of VHS wrestling tapes. And that's the origins of where these tapes came from. That's the beginnings. I bought the entire town of VHS tapes because I got so tired of having to rent them. I bought the whole town. That's just the beginning. Got my very first VCR in 1996. Now at the time I'm sitting on a pretty big collection because I had bought the entire town out of VHS tapes. I just got sick of it. I bought them all out. And now I had a collection. Now I had a collection of VHS tapes. And this is the origins. This is 25 years ago, whatever, early 90s. Now I had a collection. And now 96 comes. I have my own VCR. Every Raw, record. Every Nitro, record. Every pay-per-view, record. 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 All of it. And that's where all these tapes came from. Every single event, record. All of it. Because it was your one shot. When you ordered that pay-per-view in your house 95, record. It was your one shot to get that footage and keep that footage. Raw Championship Friday, record. And that didn't just come out till recently. I've owned that tape since 96, September 96 when it happened. Everything, record. 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 It was your only shot at that footage. Let me show you some stuff that I recorded from the early 90s. Because it was your one shot. So you didn't have enough money to access it any other way. I'd already bought the whole town out of VHS tapes. And I was going to flea markets and I was collecting at the time. So let's take a look at some of the stuff I recorded in the mid-90s. Okay, you would wait all year for the Clash of Champions on WCW. Free wrestling on TBS. 122.96, 8/15/96, 124.97. No other access to these events. None. Record. 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 You'd go down to the store and you would get a blank VHS tape. And if you knew the Clash of Champions was on, your ass was recording it. Because there was no other way to get this. The footage was so rare. WCW Up All Night 94. The only way to get that was to stay up late, be up, record the damn thing, and keep it. And that was your only access. I mean, SummerSlam 96, I bought this VHS tape years later. But the original pay-per-view recording, I watched it as a pay-per-view happened. And I kept it. Because back then, what you would do is you would record it so you could go back and watch it. You didn't do it for a collection. You didn't do it for that reason. You collected the tape because you wanted to go back and watch it. I mean, Wrestlemania 8, I recorded it because I actually wanted to go back and watch it, and I watched it a million times, over and over and over and over again. Because the footage, it was your one shot at seeing WrestleMania 8. Hold on. Okay, so I roll through the 90s, mid-90s, late 90s. Every Raw, every Nitro, every pay-per-view, all of it, record on the VHS tape. All of it's getting recorded. Then, about 98, 99, oh, hell yeah, with Stone Cold Steve Austin came out on DVD. Everything was revolutionized. The VHS tapes, all the old events. Now, late 90s, guess what? You could go on Angel Fire. You could go online. People were trading them. Now you had a way to really pump up your collection. Now everything was accessible because all the old events were online in the late 90s, early 2000s. So now you're pumping out VHS tapes left and right. All you do is send the guy a check in the mail. He sends you 40, 50 events on blank tape. Perfect. Didn't have this way before. And by 2000, all the events were pouring into Suncoast. All the DVDs were pouring into Suncoast. All the VHS tapes were now at Suncoast. So now everything's revolutionized. And so from there on, you could get all the DVDs you want, because now you could just go to the store and get them. And there was no more challenge, because for the Royal Rumble 2000, you didn't have to work no more. Man, you go to the mall, the Royal Rumble 2000's waiting for you right there on DVD. No more challenge. But I just wanted to make this video and give you guys some trials and tribulations of what the wrestling collector had to go through to get, say, Royal Rumble 2000. Yeah, you can go to the store and buy this, but for, say, Royal Rumble 89, you had to work for it, man. You had to search all over town to get this event on tape. You had to rent it. You had to record over it. You had to buy the blank VHS tape. You had to research it. You had to wait for results. You had to go through a lot in 20 years. Actually 10 years. Royal Rumble 89, 11 years in 2000. But man, the fight, the dog fight you had to go through to rent Rumble 89, in comparison to how you could just walk in the store and get Royal Rumble 2000, there's no comparison. So 11 years WWE made getting home wrestling footage so much more accessible. So I just want to give you guys kind of an origin of everything that wrestling tape collectors, kind of history. We went from Betamax to VHS tapes to record everything in sight to DVD buying, and then DVD collecting is not a challenge anymore. It's not. It's nothing. And this is easy. You got Amazon, eBay, everything. It's easy now. It's a piece of cake. You don't call nobody. You don't need no permission. If you got a 20 in your wallet, you go to Walmart, you buy the DVD, and you're done. Just remember though, the next time you walk in Walmart and you buy, say, whatever, the new Raw DVD, you walk in, you buy this, just remember, there wasn't a time when the access on this was easy, and it was tough. For a while, if you wanted 12 discs of Raw, you had to record 12 VHS tapes to get it. You had to record 12 episodes and have 12 big blank tapes. This would be your Raw collection. There'd be 12 of these. That would be your Raw collection in, say, 96. That would be your Raw collection. So I just want to tell you guys this, that wrestling DVD collections come a hell of a long way. It's a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. We used to have a real dogfight to get our footage back in the day. So anyways, I'm Gemini, and this has been the history of collecting professional wrestling. Love it. What a fun video for me. Hope you guys survived. Peace out. That's how you did it back in the day. If you wanted to record Nitro and Raw, 628.99 through 75.99. If you wanted to watch Raw and Nitro from mid-1996, that's your only option right there. Nitro and Raw, 5/27/96 to 6/17/96. Full episodes. And that was your only way, man. You had to be home, set your VCR, and record Nitro and Raw from 5/27, Scott Hall's entrance, 96 through 6/17. You recorded every week, 6 hours on a tape, no comp sets, no other way to get it. You just had to be determined, be home, and record it. And back then, it was really worth watching, too. So that's kind of what we went through as tape collectors back in the day. This was it.